Hi everyone, this video is a brush guide. I got a request from one of my students to kind of do an in-depth explanation about brushes, different brush types, what you can do with different kinds of brushes. And so I thought I would make kind of an all-encompassing guide. So to start off with, I wanted to explain the different parts of a brush. So you can kind of Google this and find all sorts of different naming conventions and different parts. They have really specific explanations for even within the hairs of the brush. But really, the most important things you have to know is that the handle is a handle. The ferrule is the metallic part of the brush, and the tip of the brush has different kinds of styles. And so you'll have to know kind of the different styles of the tip of the brush. The numbers on the brush are usually the brush size. The brand is indicated usually around that brush size number. The brush series, so within that brand, they'll have different types of lines of brushes. And so the brush series would usually come after the brand name. This can also be confusing because sometimes it's a name, like with this one, this is a Winsor Newton Azanta line. And sometimes they're just numbers. So it can be confusing, because you'll have a brush size and then a bunch of numbers, but it's actually the brush series. And the round indicates the brush type. This is a round type of brush. Brush sizes are indicated usually on the brush handle somewhere, and they go from size 0 at the smallest to, anywhere from 24 to 36, for the largest size. This is a typical kind of brush size convention of the smallest size in a line of brushes will be a size 0. The next smallest size will be a size 1. And then after that, all the numbers tend to be kind of even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. I'm not quite sure why this is the convention, but this is just traditionally what all brush sizes are named as. It goes from 0, 1, 2, and then 4, 6, 8, and so on. It really depends on the brand, what numbers it'll go up to. And sometimes even within the same brand, different lines of brushes might only go up to like a size 10 or size 12, or different types of brushes, like maybe a fan brush only goes up to a size 8. It really depends on the brand, what size is available for that brush. You'll also find that the brush sizes are created by and really depend on the brand. So I have a chart here that has the Escoda Optimo Kolinsky Sable brush. So it's a sable haired brush by the Escoda brand versus the Da Vinci brand of the same kind of hair, Kolinsky Red Sable Hair brush. And they have the same type of brush. This is a bright style of brush. And the same sizes as well, size 0, size 1, size 2, size 4, and so on. But you'll find that the measurements for those brushes are completely different. So in the width section here, you can see that the Escoda brand's bright size 0 is a 1.1 millimeter width, versus the Da Vinci brand size 0 is a 1.8 millimeter. It's actually larger than the Escoda's size 1, which is 1.7 millimeter. So, while it's useful to see the sizes, 0, 1, 2, 4, don't think of it as it means there's a specific, measurement for that size. It's really depending on the brand, and what it just means is it's the smallest size of that line of brushes, and not necessarily a very specific width. That's a convention across different brands. So, that's why if you are going to buy a brush in one size, it might be helpful to buy, the other sizes as well to kind of suit what your workflow is, instead of having, a bunch of different size brushes from different brands because, you can see how the variety of the sizes, how various it can be. And so it's good to kind of, if you like a certain kind of brush, a certain line, just kind of buy all the different sizes in that brand. Here are different brushes by shape. So these are the round tip brushes in different sizes. I have a size 0 here. This is a size 4, a size 8, and I believe this is like a size 36. So a wide range, different brands as well. But just to show you kind of how this round tip is useful in many different ways, I'm going to be working in watercolor here. And so with the skinnier, smaller round tip brushes, it's great for detail, and it's great to use as kind of like a liner brush as well. So I'm going to take just a tiny bit of water on that brush and lots of this watercolor, and you can get really, really fine lines, just kind of grazing the tip of that round point against the paper. So I'm just kind of barely touching, just grazing the paper, and you can get really skinny lines with your round tip brush. And the larger you go with the round brush, because of the roundness of the brush, how it's aligned, you can actually get quite a few hairs in there, and it becomes really fluffy. So these are the round tips in the size 8, and this is a size 36. It's really packed in with a lot of hair, so these are what I call more of like a fluffy brush. And these are great for getting kind of really smooth washes or even kind of cloud-like textures. So here's the round brush. You can get really nice kind of circular shapes. If you get a lot of water on your brush, you can do really smooth, even washes. And the larger you go, the fluffier that it'll get. And so you can do, it's great because the point, the round tip, the point of it can get you really skinny, tiny lines and dots still. So you can get really skinny, tiny lines and dots still. And at the same time, when you push down, you can get these really large cloud-like shapes, and even washes if you just kind of scrub the whole thing out. So it's a really versatile brush. So these are the flat brushes. They have a square head, and these are great for getting really skinny lines as well as very straight edges. So again, demonstrating with the watercolor here. And I'm going to use the skinniest one. This is a size 1. And if you use the whole width of the brush, you can get really nice thick lines. But if you kind of rotate and use just the edge of the brush, how it's lined, you can get really skinny brushes. So it's versatile in that you can get wide lines as well as skinny lines. And I'm just kind of grazing the paper while dragging those hairs, and you can get super fine skinny lines. I like to work with flat brushes of about this size to get really consistent skinny lines like this. I don't often use like a round brush for that. I really like using the flat brushes. All right, moving on to the larger size. Again, even with the larger size, this is a size 8. You can get, again, nice, very precise rectangular shape, but also, again, dragging along that edge. Just flipping here, dragging along that edge, you can get still really fine lines. So that's what's great about the flathead brush. It's really versatile. You can get quite a wide size and get these kind of really different sizes within your work. Very versatile. You can really do any kind of shape as well, kind of dragging and get kind of the similar width all the way through. as soon as you kind of rotate your brush. It's like calligraphy. As soon as you rotate your brush, you can get kind of skinny lines to thick lines. Then you can kind of adjust how you're either pushing down with the brush, or you can kind of rotate with the brush and get different widths and textures as well. When you get very wide, this is a size, this is a 3/4 inch flat brush. When you get very wide, it's also still nice to get that really wide flat area, and so you can get really nice washes as well. So you can get quite a wide area and a really smooth, even wash with the flat, wide, but also at the same time get a really crisp edge. So unlike the round, it's great for getting a really nice crisp edge. You can see how I'm rotating the brush to use kind of the sides. The sides are what are also really straight. It's aligned very straight, so it's much easier to get kind of a straight edge that way, just dragging the brush along as straight as you can. And so if you're doing a wash but you want it to get a straighter edge at the end of it, I recommend using the flat brush. So this is the bright type brush, and so bright is just another flat brush. It's kind of a square head brush, but it's shorter in the hairs. So just to show you what I was working with in the nylons there, this was the flat head, and you can see how this is probably like a similar size, but much shorter for the bright. And so the bright is just kind of a shorter, flat brush. And the reason that it's nice to have a shorter hair brush, and this is a bristle hair one, is that because it's short, it's nice and stiff, and it's going to be helpful for oil painting, or even for watercolors. If you're trying to erase something, a stiffer brush is going to be a little bit easier for that. And the shorter the hairs, the stiffer it's going to get. The longer it is, the more soft and flexible it's going to be. So this is a oil painting here, and I'm going to have some oil on the brush. And so just like with the watercolor example, it's great to get kind of a rectangular block shape, as well as getting kind of skinnier lines as soon as you kind of rotate and use just the edge of the brush. But it's also great for just getting kind of a texture with that stiffness of the brush. So I like using brights for oil painting and kind of as a scrubbing brush for watercolor. So this is a filbert brush, and the left two are synthetic and synthetic nylon, and the right two are in bristle. And a filbert is a rounded, kind of like oval shaped tip to the brush. So it looks like it could be kind of like a flathead, but you'll see that the corners are kind of rounded in. And this is great for getting kind of soft textures as well. So it's versatile in that you can use the edge to get like a straight edge, really sharp straight edge, but then you can use the tip of the hair to get really soft textures. So it's kind of a combination of the round and the flat. So using just the side of the brush, you still can get really straight edge and really fine lines. So here's a nice kind of straight edge. But if you use kind of the tip of the brush, that oval tip, you can get really soft, circle-like shapes, really soft edges. So it's kind of like a combination of the round and the flat. So this is the fan shape brush, and and the liner brush. And a liner brush is kind of like a round brush, but with a much longer, longer hairs, and often much smaller, finer tip. Great for making lines, fine lines, script-like shapes. And I don't actually own any fan or liner brushes. You can see from my collection, which is in these photographs. I don't actually own any fan or liner brushes. A fan brush is great for getting certain kinds of textures. If you're working with like grass or like foliage, it can make those kind of like grass-like textures very easily. And so I know a lot of artists like to use fan brushes for, just getting a different texture. But I'm really a proponent of using kind of minimal amount of tools. I think that the different types, the round, the flat, the bright, the filbert, are kind of enough for me to get kind of the different textures that I need. And so I don't often reach for a fan brush, and that's why I don't really have any in my collection. You can also see that I have a lot of different kinds of brushes and different brands from over the years. And so it's really great if you find a brush that you like, that you buy all the different sizes. But I've just collected and have received different brushes from different brands, and so this is the collection that I work with. And I'm that kind of artist that just works with what I have, and so this is what works for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's what you should do or it's what works for everybody else. So definitely, try out different brushes, try out different kinds of styles, and see what you like to use. So you'll often see bristle hair as a type of brush, and it's great for oil painting. And really, you only use it mostly for oil painting. Anything kind of like a thick paint, thick, heavy body paint. And so it's great for oil painting. Softer hairs are better for watercolor, gouache, ink, really liquidy, water-based medias are great with the soft hair brushes. With the bristle hair, it tends to be stiff and kind of harder to bend. And again, that's what's going to help to kind of carry that heavy body paint. With a soft hair, it's very soft and flexible, very fluid. It's going to move much easier with your water-based medias. Bristle hair also tends to be more textured, so it's very rough. The hairs tend to be kind of going in a little bit more of a different directions and can give you more of that textured look. You'll see more of your brush strokes within your painting. Soft hair tends to be smooth. The hairs themselves tend to be straighter and just more aligned, straighter and softer. And so it creates overall a smooth texture, or, a lack of brush strokes, a lack of texture in that sense. Bristle hair traditionally was made out of hog's hair. There is synthetic bristle available, but traditionally it was made out of hog's hair. And so synthetic bristle is trying to mimic that texture and that rough stiffness of hog's hair. Soft hair brushes are typically made of sable, squirrel, goat, or pony hairs if it's natural. And if it's synthetic, it's typically made out of some kind of nylon. They're talking about natural hair versus synthetic hair. So natural hair means it's real animal hair, and synthetic hair is made out of synthetic fibers like nylon. The difference is that there is a really different texture and feel to real animal hair. So, because it's real hair, it can kind of go in different directions, or it has more of a texture to the hair itself. It just feels different from synthetic hair. Synthetic hair tends to be very uniform and not have much of a texture to the hairs themselves. It's very very straight, very uniform. Natural hair requires more delicate care. You can think about it as, how you would take care of your own hair. You'd want to shampoo it daily, or You'd want to shampoo it when it's dirty. You'd want to condition it to soften it. So it does require more delicate care, and it can't really withstand too much damage. So it does get harder to maintain because of that. Synthetic hair is a lot easier to clean and maintain. You can damage it a lot, and it's really easy to just clean it and maintain it because it's just really durable. It's not real hair, so it's not going to tear as easily. It's really easy to clean and maintain. So the natural hair is just like our own hair. It is porous and therefore kind of absorbent. So if you're working with any kind of water-based media, you'll find that the hairs themselves can absorb some of that water. Synthetic hair is not porous, and so it is not absorbent like natural hair is. And it really depends kind of what you're using it for, whether that absorbency is important or not. And so if you were using a watercolor if you were working with watercolor and you wanted to do a really big wash in the background, you might want to use synthetic hair so that it's not as absorbent. And you can go pretty far with just one dip of the brush in the water. You might be able to go stretch that out pretty far, versus the natural hair, it might not last as long. You might not get a larger area of wash because the hairs are so absorbent. But maybe in a smaller section where you want to go from a really smooth texture and transition to a rough texture, you'll know that with the natural hair, because it's so absorbent, and it's going to dry out a little bit faster, you can easily go from really, really wet to more of a dry texture with the natural hair. So it's really just understanding kind of how the brushes work and using them in areas that are beneficial to them. And then and in regards to acrylic, you really don't want to use acrylic with any kind of natural hair brush, because the acrylic, as it dries, it really damages that delicate natural hair. So think about, getting acrylic paint that's so plasticky into your own hair. It's such a pain to get out of your hair. But with synthetic hair, it's kind of like plastic against plastic. It really is a lot easier to kind of peel off dried up acrylic off of a synthetic brush. So I would definitely recommend using synthetic hair brushes for acrylic and avoid natural hair brushes with the acrylic. So just to show you the difference between a synthetic and a natural hair brush, the brush on the left here is a synthetic hair brush, and the brush on the right is a natural hair, probably something like squirrel hair brush. And these are both in a round tip and about the similar size. This is a size 3 and this one is a size 4. And just to show you kind of the difference between a synthetic and a natural hair, I'm going to try this out in watercolor. And so with the synthetic, it absorbs less of the water and stays kind of fairly wet for quite a long time. And so you can see as I run out of paint, starting to get kind of that dry brushy effect. And with the natural hair here, it feels a lot softer, but it is quite absorbent. So I use the same amount of water, and you can see I actually need more water than the synthetic to make that paint more wet. And so it requires a bit more water because of the natural hairs being more porous and absorbing more of that water. So I've just gone and dipped my paintbrush in, and it's quite wet now. And it just feels a lot softer to work with. The nylons are always going to be you know, a little bit stiffer unless they go really fine with the hairs. And so it just feels kind of different. It feels a lot softer. But it does dry out a little bit faster because of the porousness of the hairs, the porosity in the hairs. Again, dipping my brush in the nylon here. And you can see that it stays wet for a lot longer. It's quite wet, and I can kind of go further distances, push further out with the paint. And so, you know, it really depends on what section you're working on within your painting, what would be more beneficial to you. I don't recommend, you know, just sticking to only one type of brush. You can really use both a synthetic and a natural hair and use it in the areas that are beneficial for that. So if you're doing like a wash and wanting to go further distances, maybe you do want a synthetic brush for that. But if you want more texture that the natural hairs are going to give, and you know, you actually want the brush to dry out at a certain point, you know, you might want to use the natural hairs instead for that. And so just discussing some miscellaneous brushes here. There are some great natural and synthetic blend brushes out. So these are kind of a blend of natural hairs and synthetic hairs. And so it creates kind of, you know, it creates kind of a blend between the two where it will have the texture of a natural hairbrush, but also that less absorbent quality of a synthetic brush. So kind of trying to get the best of both worlds there. So that's something that you might want to check out. I highly recommend if you're working with watercolor to check out the Silver Brands scrubber brush. It has a filbert edge, and this brush is really stiff. It's a nylon synthetic hair, but it's quite stiff. It feels quite hard, and there's no budge to it really. So this is great for erasing out watercolors. The shortness of the brush and the stiffness of it makes it great for scrubbing. So I've got my brush just a bit damp, not dripping wet, and I'm going to go in and just scrub. This is a really old dried out watercolor, dot of watercolor there, and I'm going to go and scrub, and you can see how it's really lifted that green color. It's quite amazing at scrubbing away, and so it's a really great eraser brush. A little word of warning though, you want to make sure you're using a piece of paper that is going to withstand all of that scrubbing. So even though I'm using quite a heavy weight watercolor paper, it is lifting a little bit of that paper. And so you want to be as gentle as you can. Try to not overwork the paper so much, and give it a break in between scrubbing. But there you go, it's pretty much gone. So it's a really great eraser brush. I also like to get hardware store bristle brushes for pretty cheap. So you can go to any hardware store and they'll carry like really large 2-inch bristle brushes at super cheap. And it's great for, you know, doing large washes in your underpainting or covering just a really large area. For just doing an underpainting wash, I don't think it's important to get like a super high quality brush. So I like to just use kind of the cheap dollar ones from the hardware store. You would want to get something a little bit more expensive when getting a varnish or a gesso brush. And so when you're varnishing, that's kind of like a final touch to your painting. You want to use a really high quality brush that's not going to shed a bunch of hairs and not really leave too much of a texture behind. And so I would definitely check out the brands that make varnish and the brands that make gesso. They usually carry their own line of varnish and gesso brushes. And so you would want to get the specific brush that is designed to go with that specific varnish or gesso to get that really high quality look. I also recommend, sometimes artists just throw away their old brushes that's like really old and crusty and has a bunch of dried paint on it and stuff. I like to keep those because they actually have really nice texture on their own. So anything, even with like a dried clump of paint on it, can create a really interesting, unique texture. And so I recommend kind of like keeping some of those really old, dried out, crusty brushes with chunks of paint on them, because you'll never know when you kind of want to get a different kind of texture that your brand new soft smooth brushes just really can't get. So just discussing how to wash and maintain your brush, and a few tips. So never leave your brush in the water. If you can pretend that this water cup is full of water, and as you're rinsing and switching paintbrushes, I think a lot of beginning artists tend to kind of leave their brushes in the water. And I advise all my students kind of not to do that, because the ferrule here is actually glued onto the handle, and over time, if you leave your brushes in the water for a really long time, it's going to break down the glues. And so even in the most expensive brushes, eventually that metal part is actually going to fall off your handle. And I have an example here to show you of one that is falling off, that actually came off. So and that's just because the glue has just deteriorated over time, and so you can end up ruining a lot of brushes that way. If this does happen to you though, what you can try to do is use like a really strong glue, or like super glue, and try to like glue it back in together. And again, try really hard not to kind of leave your brushes in the water, so that this doesn't happen. All right, when you're drying, after you've washed your brush and you are drying the brushes off, I recommend drying them horizontally. So I like to just leave it on top of my water cup like this so that it can dry. You want to make sure that you're not drying them kind of upside down, with the brush hairs pointing up, because again, that just means the water is going to drip down into the ferrule here, and again kind of deteriorate some of the glue. And you also don't want to leave the hairs pointed down into the brush, because then that actually tends to bend the hairs and you won't have these nice straight tips, and you'll have kind of bent hairs. So you want to be careful for when you're drying your brushes as well, and that's why I like to just kind of leave them out horizontally to dry. Always rinse your brushes often when working in acrylic. So acrylic dries super, super fast, and you want to make sure you're rinsing your brush often, even if you're still using the same color. If you find that it gets kind of hard to kind of drag that paintbrush across, it's probably the paint is drying too much and becoming just like plastic onto your brush. And so you want to rinse as often as you can so that the paint is not just drying onto your brush. Also makes cleanup so much easier later on if you're constantly rinsing. Natural hairs need a conditioning soap like the Masters Brush Soap. Definitely check out the Masters Brush Soap to condition. It's your natural hair brushes are just like your own hair. So you wouldn't just shampoo your hair and not condition. You want to make sure that you're conditioning your brushes for longer life. Be gentle with your brushes, especially your natural hair brushes, and use proper washing techniques. All right, so to properly wash your brushes and maintain your brushes, especially if you're using natural hair brushes, these are all bristle hairs, so natural hair brush. You want to make sure that you rinse well with your brush. I'm going to rinse here and try to get all the paint off my brush. All right, and then I do a two-step method. I do Regular soap, this is just regular bar soap, nothing special. Preferably use something that's not like heavily scented, probably kind of like a more natural soap. And after that, I use the Master's Brush Cleaner and Preserver. It's a really nice kind of conditioning kind of soap, and you'll feel it after you use your brush that it feels more like it's been conditioned. So think of your brush as like treating your own hair. The paints are really drying. So imagine getting a bunch of paint on your hair. The paints are very drying on your natural hair brushes. And so you want to clean off the paint as well as you can, and then use something like the Master's Brush Cleaner to condition the hairs so that they're nice and soft and in good condition for a lot longer. So the more that you kind of do this process and really take care of your brushes, the longer lifespan your brushes will have. So just to go in and show you how I would do that, how I would clean. I'm going to go in and just scrub onto my bar soap here. I've just put this in a tin, but you could definitely just have it on a soap dish or something. You don't have to do this. It's just, for me, I like that it's portable like this, so I've just kept it in a tin. So I go in and I get a good amount of soap in there, get it really sudsy. You might have to get your hands into this, really work the soap all the way up into the ferrule, so underneath the metallic part of your brush there. So I'm working the soap into the hairs, trying to get all the paint that tends to get clogged up right at the base of the hairs. So I like to kind of hold it between my thumb and the rest of my fingers and just kind of pinch it and pull it, really working the soap into the brush. Then I'm going to rinse that off with clean water here. And that's already really nice and clean, but again, just the natural soap would be really drying to the hair. So think about, like, with your own hair, it would be just like shampooing your hair but not conditioning it. And so I'm going to go in and use the Master's Brush Cleaner here. Get a few swipes of that. And I like to use the cap so I can keep my hands clean. I like to use the cap to just swirl that around in. And so at this stage you really shouldn't see any color coming out. You should have gotten all the color out with the regular bar soap. And I like to have it clean enough so that when I'm going in here, I'm really just conditioning and maybe picking up tiny bits of paint that the regular soap missed. But this way I'm not using something so expensive. This soap, tends to add up. So I'm not using something so expensive to do just basic cleaning. I'm really using this soap as more of like a conditioner. So again, really working that conditioner in there. And then rinsing that. And you should really feel the difference. Once this dries, you'll really feel like it feels a lot softer than not having used the conditioner. You'll feel like it's conditioned nicely, like after you've conditioned your hair. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I give out free videos about once a month. You can find me on Instagram at Asami_bunny if you want to message me and maybe request a video that you'd like to see. Or you can email me as well and let me know what kind of video that you would like to see. And yeah, have a great one. Thanks for watching.